There is noticeably a different standard of architecture being produced in the island. Certainly the standard has improved. But what I noticed, I mentioned to you, I've never seen an ugly Jersey farmhouse. Now, they were all produced without any benefit of a planning process. And the most revered buildings in the island, the churches and the old buildings, the castles, the fortifications, they're all the most revered, and they were all produced without a planning process. Why is it necessary now, with all our extra knowledge, skills, that we desperately need the planning process now, where people in the past didn't need it?
Well, one of the reasons that the planning process control was established was to prevent certain monstrosities that have been built happening in the future. So the Natural Beauties Commission was designed to look at schemes and only pass them if they would enhance the natural beauty of the island, and that was one of their primary purposes. The reason I think that you see a lot of old traditional buildings, the churches, the farmhouses, sitting into the landscape and the context very nicely, is because for centuries building techniques hasn't really changed. People were building with not very much modern materials or equipment. They were building using granite and thick walls with pantile roofs, and so the architecture was very universal within the island, and there was a commonality. Now with modern materials you can actually do something which, and modern techniques, you can do something which is a real departure from what's there at the moment, and so the planning controls do ensure that what is built is appropriate. You could say that the German fortifications, some of those are really ugly and actually jar in the landscape. I know that's heresy to say that, and I do apologise to members of the Channel Islands Occupation Society. I very much support the retention of the German World War II structures, but if you wanted to build the radio control tower at Corbière, for example, now, and put that in a scheme for that, everybody would be horrified.
Well, I suspect you wouldn't get...
They would say, no, you can't destroy the landscape by building this concrete tower with these slits. Isn't it horrible? But I mean, clearly the occupation structures have a strong link to Jersey's history and also a very emotional attachment, and so they have become part of the landscape because of that.
They are absolutely function dictates form buildings, aren't they? Because they're military, and they are very sculptural. But if you were to apply now, if St John's Church didn't exist and you were to apply for permission, you wouldn't get permission to build it, would you?
I would think you would, actually. Yes, I would be. The planners might say, well,
they'd say reduce the height.
Reduce the height. That's right. Yes, take off the spire.
Exactly.
And maybe we need a bit more sort of green landscape around it. But
the discussion is relevant because the building which has now finally been approved, the cluster that has been approved there, is in the form of a traditional farm hamlet layout, and the buildings could have been built by the look of them as though they were built in the 18th century, which is where the classic Jersey farmhouses were built, and they all fit into the landscape remarkably well, and Yorn makes that attempt to fit into the landscape remarkably well. So there's something in my head thinking, well, what's the battle all about, really? Because if they could do that in the 18th century, it's simple enough to do it now, isn't it?
It is, yeah. What we didn't want at Plemont Holiday Village was another portlet. I mean, we wanted something that was totally different and wasn't very modern and in your face. We wanted to reflect the traditional historic character of the area, and the clusters of farm buildings and other settlements that are dotted around the St One's countryside, just around this area and where the site is. And so it was seen as an extension of, for example, Port Infer and other buildings that are nearby, rather than something completely different. So it was a conscious decision to look at a very traditional design.
Did you look at other designs over the 14 years?
Yeah, we looked at some very modern ones. We looked at some underground schemes, and you either take the approach of minimising impact and making it fit into the setting, or making a dramatic statement. We just felt that making a very modern dramatic statement in this location was not the right way to go.
Obviously there's nothing wrong with traditional, it's just that as you say, there are opportunities. You go around Jersey, you see modern buildings and they're using lots of glass and they're using lots of visible devices to preserve energy and so on. So these are not noticeably doing that. Presumably, no doubt they will be doing it, but it's not noticeable.
Well, they'll be highly insulated and require very low energy input and have a heat pump with whole house ventilation, so the heat will be reused within the house. So they're going to have a very low running cost and be eco houses, even though they don't look like them. I mean, you don't need to have energy efficient houses looking like sort of they've come out of tomorrow's 22nd century world. They can be, it's what happens inside the envelope. The jumper can look very traditional, but it's what's underneath the vest has got to be thick and highly insulated. The
planning minister was this week was just when he wasn't being criticised for the Masrays at scrutiny, he was saying about the standards on insulation, for want of a simpler expression, were going to be dramatically increased. I think an extra 60% on top of what's there now is just around the corner. So traditional looking buildings might be struggling a bit to accommodate some of what he's got in mind.
Well, yeah, I don't subscribe to the view that you've got to continually increase the standards on new buildings in terms of thermal insulation. You need to have a high standard on new buildings, but that's not where the actual challenge is. The challenge is to get our existing building stock properly insulated. That forms the most of where the heat loss is from buildings. Really the state should be introducing support and encouragement for existing buildings to be seriously thermally upgraded to a good standard. And that will have a big reduction in energy consumption. Not the new buildings, because you don't get many new buildings in every 10 years. I think they need to change direction in terms of their eco-active policy.
The Masrays scheme, which has become famous the last few weeks, I don't know how it's going to be resolved, but have you got any feelings about what's been going on down there?
Well, I think it's very unfortunate that the Masrays have got upset with what appears to be a revised planning brief, and I think there needs to be further negotiation. I mean, I spent 6 years with the scheme that's got approved at Plemont Holiday Village, negotiating and talking with the planning department, and my client was always saying to me, that's what we want to do. We want to work with the local people, local authority to reach a solution that will be acceptable. You know, I've not been at looking at the north of town long and their property holding there. The Masrays, I don't believe, have put in a planning application yet. I think have shown that in case of Plemont Holiday Village that perseverance pays off, and I think there's more work required there to actually produce a successful result. I
mean, they were asking some fairly fundamental questions about the planning process, and there's more discussion going to take place, but do you think in its current form it is workable? Do you think planning is workable? It's not come to the buffers as far as you're concerned?
I think there's some improvements, as I said earlier, there is too much weight given to the process after the statutory periods. For example, you've got a 3-week public consultation period and time for consultees to respond to an application, which is laid down in statute. But after that, the whole thing could drag on for months and years, and the timescales need sharpening up. The consultees need to respond to applications more quickly, and in the case of major developments, once the planning brief for the site has been approved by the Minister for consultation and gone out to consultation, and if there's no public comments to it, then why change the brief? I think that's probably what upset the managers, from my understanding of it, is that they felt they got a very positive public comment on the consultations to the planning brief, and then having got to that stage, the Minister did not adopt the brief, but there were changes made to it, and I think they asked themselves why. The Minister had agreed to publish the brief for consultation. The consultation didn't produce anything that needed changing, particularly as I understand it, but nevertheless changes started creeping in. So I think that's what upset them. But I hope they do get around the table with the planning department again.
Well, your battle's not over. You've got a public meeting tonight.
Yes, well,
you'll be attending.
I will be attending, but I can't say anything because it's the Chief Minister's meeting, and I did ask him if I could make a short presentation about the scheme, but he declined. So I'll be an interested observer as a member of the public.
Well, that's extraordinary, because even at the scrutiny meeting I attended, the magistrates were sitting there, but they weren't allowed to speak at that one either, so it seems a very strange process, doesn't it, that people aren't allowed to say their piece. I mean, somebody ought to be speaking for your client, isn't it, at this meeting?
Well, exactly, but I haven't been given the opportunity. It does seem that in certain instances the interests of open debate and democracy aren't being served, and people are sort of fencing themselves in and to reinforce their positions.
Is your model going to be along as a silent witness, or is that not going?
No,
they've
not asked for the model. They probably don't want the model. They probably prefer not to see it. They're going to see lots of pictures of puffins and kestrels and wildlife from the National Trust for Jersey. It's going to be a presentation that tugs on the heartstrings, I'm sure. But they don't want any details of the scheme distributing at the public meeting. But of course the next week we've got the States debate.
States debate, yes. And so it goes on.
Yes.
Well, nice to speak to you.
Thank you.
Thanks much indeed.